And welcome to this video where we're going to be covering how to add transitions, to create transitions in our Ableton Live set to make it look more like a Sunday morning service. So in the previous video we covered how to add the song elements, how to add the multi-tracks. We named locators, we worked on file management and stuff like that in the previous video. And now we're going to talk about taking this to the next level with actual transitions between the songs, the way that we would have it on a Sunday morning. So the first step is adding locators for all of the non-song elements of our service. And to do that, I'm going to pull up the Ableton set that we're working with, which again is April 15th, 2018, Sunday service. And in ProPresenter, I'm pulling up the service plan as well. So this is April 15th, 2018. And I'm going to move it so that I can see both windows, so that I can work in Ableton but also see ProPresenter, or sorry, Planning Center. So the first thing I need to do is go down the line, and I've got a locator for Unstoppable God. You remember in the previous video, the template we were working with had locators already loaded into it. So the number 1 locator we renamed, and that's associated with the 1 key on the keyboard and the 1 pad on the MIDI controller by the drum set. 2, 3, 4, and 5 are all in there, and we've got 3 songs, so we added song content to those locators. But now we're going to add additional locators for all of the non-song things. So the welcome happens after Unstoppable God in the service. So I want to go to the end of Unstoppable God and find a good place to put a locator that I'm going to name welcome. You might think I'd put it at the very end of the content here, but in reality, the song ended back here. So if you listen, what I do when I add locators for the non-song elements is I go in and I listen to how did the song end, and there's usually a really smart place to put the locator very, very specifically, because that's going to be the anchor point when we add things like lighting transitions, and I want the lights to go up at a certain point, not just somewhere near the end of the song. So I'm going to listen to the end of the song. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the locator right at that last hit. And that's because when I add my lighting cue, I want the lights to go up right then. It's kind of like punctuating the song. And the lights change. So I'm going to click here and click Set to add the locator, and then I'm going to rename this by right-clicking, rename. I'm going to type in welcome in all caps. Cool, so I've got a locator for this. I don't really need a locator for the volunteer spotlight because they're really kind of happening at the same time. It appears separately on the service plan, but they happen really at the same time within the service, at least in terms of what Ableton will be doing. So I can skip that. And then the next thing is Reckless Love, which again we have locator number 2 is Reckless Love. At the end of Reckless Love, we have the message or the sermon. And so I'm going to go to the end here and find where's a good place to put the locator for the message. Listen to the outro. Yeah, again, this would be a great place. It's got that big kind of last hit to punctuate the song. I'm going to click Set, right-click, rename this to Message. You can do Message or Sermon. Either one's fine. And then, so that is the locator for the message. And then the next thing in the service is Worthy, which again we already have in there, number 3. The offering and celebrations and benediction come after that. So I'm going to go to the end, and again I'm going to listen to the end of the song to find a good place for this locator. Looks like the same place right at the end clip. So that's not always the case. I recommend that you listen to it and kind of, it takes kind of an artistic eye and ear to think through, okay, when do I want the lights to come up? When do I want the person who's doing the offering to catch the ball and take the floor and start talking? So it might be different depending on the song, but all of these happen to be right at the end clip here. So Set, rename, and we'll just name this Celebrations, even though it's really all 3 of these things. Celebrations is clear. So that's great. So we've added locators. Now the next thing to do is to add visual cues. And visual cues are It's essentially a dummy MIDI clip. So it's a MIDI clip that has no content in it. It's really just a visual, again, a visual cue of what's supposed to happen, and it should be at the very lowest track. So right now we've got a group of tracks for Worthy. Below that, I want to put another track. It's a MIDI track where I'm going to be able to add clips in this section that'll give a visual cue to people about to go on stage to say, hey, your transition's coming up, you need to get out on stage. So to do that, I'm going to right click here and insert MIDI track. There's a shortcut. I could do Command-Shift-T, or I could also go up to Create, Insert MIDI track. So I'll do that. And I'm gonna change the color of this to be white, which is important because the people who are referencing this for their visual cue are looking for the white track. I don't do any other tracks white but this one. So the very bottom right there, I'm gonna rename this visual cue. Perfect, and you can fold it down. And this is what it should look like every week. This is what the celebrations people are trained to look for, is a track that looks like this. And we're going to go to each one of these non-song elements. Actually, we're going to go to all the locators that we've added so far and ask the question, do I need to give a visual cue? And where this is going to be useful is backstage. We've got a TV that displays the Ableton set. And again, people who are about to go on stage are looking at that TV and they're reading right before the locator. This is where they should be on stage. But as the cursor progresses towards that, we want something to say, okay, in this section you've got 20 seconds left, and then right here you need to be on stage. So that's what we're going to do now. The first thing in our service where we need that is the first song. This is where the band is coming out, and this is going to be their cue. So we're going to click on the locator itself in the track, in the visual cues track, and right down here you can see this is the 5-minute mark, and I'm going to go back 20 seconds. So I'm going to go from 5 minutes to all the way back to 4 minutes and 40 seconds. Looking down here, 4 minutes and 40 seconds, and I can shift click to select all of that space, and I'm going to do Command-Shift-M, or I can right click for Insert MIDI clip. So Command-Shift-M is the shortcut, or just Insert MIDI clip is fine as well. Rename this to be 0020 seconds remaining, so that once the cursor, the band knows that once the cursor enters this point, there's 20 seconds remaining. Now there's less than that, but right here is where there's 20 seconds remaining. See, 4 minutes and 40 seconds, and then they should be on stage by this point. And then on this side of the locator, I want to do the same thing. I'm going to insert a MIDI clip, or I can just do Command-Shift-M, and I'm going to rename this to Band on Stage. And I'm going to change the color of this one to red, which is to kind of, signal alarm. If you're not on stage by this point, something breaks in the service. So, so that's done. That's the first transition that we need to add a visual cue for. The next one is the welcome. So remember, we added a locator right here, and I'm going to do the same thing. This locator happens at 9 minutes and 12 seconds in our Ableton set. So I'm going to go back in time 20 seconds to, what would that be, 8 minutes and 52 seconds. So I'm just going to scroll back and look for 8 minutes, 52 seconds. And it doesn't have to be exact. It looks like this is split between 2 beats on the grid. So I'm just going to go right here and shift click so that I can select all of that space. See, that is all selected. And then insert MIDI clip. I'm going to rename that with Command-R. 20 seconds remaining. And then at the end, or on the back side of that welcome locator, I'm going to add another clip. Rename this Elena and Jen on stage. I'm going to change this to red again to signify this is the point where you need to be at your mark and on stage. So the next locator I actually don't need a visual cue for because the band will still be out on stage, and so I can leave that blank. But Mark will need a visual cue for his message. So at the message locator, I'm going to go here and do the same thing. 16:15, so I want 15:55. It's right there. shift click, Command Shift M, Command R to rename, 20 seconds remaining. And the same thing on this side. I'm going to shift click, Command Shift M, Command R to rename mark on stage. Rename or change the color of this to red. That was by right clicking and clicking on the red square. So then the next visual cue that is going to be necessary, you might think it's for the song right here because the band needs to come out. And that's true, but we actually don't need a visual cue because Ableton won't be playing, and so that won't be helpful. So it's only helpful right here at the beginning of the song to have a visual cue for the band because Ableton is playing during the 5-minute countdown. During the sermon, which was the last thing in our progress here as we're moving through the set, Ableton stops, and then the band comes on stage and restarts Ableton. So a visual cue for the response song wouldn't really make sense. But I do want a visual cue for the celebrations people who are coming out after Worthy. So similar process, I click here, and I look, where's that? So 255, 6, 7, 8. So at 2358 is where the celebrations people should be out. So I'm going to rewind 20 seconds to 2338. 38. Shift click, Command Shift M, Command R, 20 seconds remaining. And then select a little section here to be able to say Elena and Jen on stage. It doesn't really matter how long this is, just as long as it's big enough to be able to read all the text. And then I'm going to rename this red, or relabel that red. So I've added the visual cues. That's the next step. So we've added locators for all the non-song elements and visual cues where we need them. And now we're going to add and position pads, or pad clips, to play during certain moments of the service. So when, again, looking through our service plan here, I've got Unstoppable God comes down into the welcome. I want to have a pad playing behind Jen and Elena while they're doing the welcome and the volunteer spotlight here. And then I want that pad to lead right into Reckless Love. So I know a few things based on that. I want the pad to be in the key of B, as in boy, because I want it to flow smoothly and seamlessly from their welcome and their volunteer spotlight right into the next song. So I don't want it to be a different key than this. But I also, there's something else that I need to know about this, is I don't know really how long this is going to take. And so we're going to cover next, we're going to talk about how to add a repeat mode into Ableton that'll just cause it to loop that section of pad that we're about to add. But right now let's just talk about how to add the pad. So we're going to go to the welcome, which again was right here after the first song. And I have this pads group right here that I'm going to fold down. And I have this track in here just kind of preloaded as part of the template. It says enter key, so I'm going to enter the key that I want, rename that with Command R, or I could right click, rename, and I'm going to call this B pad. So this is going to be the track for my B pad. And then I'm going to go find an audio clip of a pad in B. So over here, if I unfold my search pane, I've got local Ableton files in my places area here, and I'm going to look for a pad. So I've got, fold this down, I've got a pads folder that I can unfold, and these are all different types of pads. They're all pretty cool, but the one that I reach for when I'm using just for a transition like this is Worship Team Pads 5 Simple Pads. I don't know why it's called that, but it is. So unfold that, and then find, there's all these different keys, all 12 keys. I could pick one of these and drop it in, and I'm going to pick the B pad. I'm going to drop it in right here, but I'm probably, after I do this, I'm probably going to look for a way to move it forward a little bit so it kind of overlaps with these clips, because again, this is where the song punctuated, and then it's kind of fading out. I don't want this to come too early because this is in the key of C, according to the service plan. And this is in the key of B, so if they're overlapping at all, it's going to sound disgusting. But I want it to be a smooth transition where this is fading out and then this starts to fade in. But when I add, okay, so just a word about this pad clip. So I added this in, And this is 20 minutes. Oh my goodness, that's an enormous pad clip, right? So I don't need all of that. Right away, the first thing I'm going to do, let me fold this back up so I can see this a little better, is this is probably plenty of runway for the pad. So what I can do is click here and split the clip and then delete everything after it. So essentially I'm going to cut it right here. So if I click here and right click split or Command E, this creates a split right there where I can drag it around, or what I'm just going to do is delete it because this is really all the section of pad that I want. And then the other really important thing to do is to add a tempo clip to everywhere where this pad is going to exist. So really every element of the service where Ableton is playing, I want control of the tempo. And it's hard to explain why, but that's really important when you add pads. So I'm going to take a little section of this tempo clip from the next song. I can just copy the first measure of it, click here, paste that, and then I can stretch it out to cover the entire gap. And do you see how this pad clip is shrinking as I do that? Again, it's hard to explain. I'm not going to explain why, but that's part of why you have to have this here. If you don't have control of the tempo, then the tempo can change as you edit, and then you'll get these little gaps where, man, when I entered this, I had the pad clip covering this section, but now it's shrunk and it's weird and missing. So anyway, when you add the pad, just know that you have to add a tempo track to kind of govern the tempo for that section of audio. So again, what we're going to do is we want to position this pad so that it swells in right when it should. So let's listen to how this Unstoppable God ends. And probably right here is fine for it to start to swell in that B pad. That's great. So that's real smooth. This is going to fade out, and then this is going to fade in at that point. But do you know, I dragged this forward a little bit, so now I have to look at the back end of it. Yeah, I dragged it too far. So what would happen here is you have kind of a little gap where there's no music. So I want to position this now to fade out, which I can add a fade to this clip so that it'll fade out as this song is beginning to fade in. So let's listen to how that is happening right now, and then see what edits we need to make.
Intro 4, 5, 6.
So I probably want this to fade during that first hit. So I'm going to click this section here, select just kind of the last two beats of that that pad clip, and I can right click, create fade out, or Command Shift F. I'm sorry, Option Shift F? No, Command Option F. Yes, Command Option F. Cool. So then this will have a nice fade in and a nice fade out.
Intro 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, it's really smooth. So now I will add a pad for coming out of the sermon, coming out of Reckless Love and before the sermon. So what will happen often is we'll end the song right before the sermon, and then Mark will come out to preach the sermon, but he'll kind of interact with that worship moment. Maybe he'll give a little exhortation, or he'll pray, and then the band will go off stage. But during that little kind of in-between part where he's kind of interacting with the worship moment, I like to bring it down to a pad just so there's a little bit of content behind him. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy this B pad. I'm going to reuse it over on this side of the song. So I'm going to add it right here. And again, I have to add the tempo clip. So I'm going to copy the first measure of the tempo clip, come over to where the tempo clip for the song actually ends, and paste that. Just so, again, I continue to have control over the tempo that Ableton is playing back at. If I click here right now, it's playing at 96, but during the song it was 84, and I want that to remain true during this little interactive part. Cool. So I'm going to stretch this out to about there. That looks good. And let's just listen to that. Yeah, that's really smooth. That looks great. So then I'm going to, at this point, so I've got a pad for the interactive, for the message, and then I also need a pad for the response noodling, is what it's called. And where I add that is at the end of the interactive pad for the message. I skip a measure, so I'm going to go 487, 488, and I'm going to add a locator for response noodling. I'm going to rename this response noodling. And this is where when the drummer comes out, he's going to hit play right here, and I want to swell in a pad in the key of the next song, which in this case is F. It looks like G, that's the original key of the original song, but we're playing it in F. So I need an F pad, and I don't want to use the same track. I'm going to insert a new track, a new audio track. So right click and insert audio track, or Command T. I'm going to rename this F pad. And I can shrink this down just for aesthetic purposes. Great. Okay, so in this section right here, I want a pad to play in F. So I'm going to open my search pane, and I've got this F pad right here. I'm going to drag that in. Looks good, but again, that's a 20-minute clip of audio. You see how long it goes in my overview up here. I only want it to go to the intro of the song, so I'm going to split it right there with Command E and delete. That looks good. But again, what's missing is the tempo track. So I do not have control of the tempo of Ableton right now, and I want it. So I'm going to select the first measure of this tempo track for the next song. I'm going to paste it, stretch it out. You see how much that shrank? So that's why we do that. It's really important to add that in. And then listen to how it fades from here into the next song.
Intro 2, 3, 4.
That's kind of abrupt, so I'm going to actually stretch it out a little bit past the downbeat and then fade it over the downbeat. So that what I did there was select the section here, just the last couple beats, and Command Option F, or I can right click and create fade out. That's what I just did there. So let's listen to that again.
Intro 2, 3, 4.
That's much more smooth. So this is looking good. The last thing that we need to do in creating transitions is to add repeat mode, or auto repeat. And so essentially the problem we have right now is, let me fold this down so we can see a little better, is the Unstoppable God will end, the B pad will fade in, and as we mentioned, we don't know how long Jen and Elena are going to be speaking for. It may be longer than this amount of time, it may be shorter than this amount of time, but I definitely don't want this song to start on accident while they're still doing the welcome. So what I can do is add what's called a repeat mode, or an auto repeat in this case. And I've got hidden over here in the far right of my overview, I've got a secret little tool called the previous locator clip. So I'm going to click over here in the far right of my overview, and hidden in this repeat group is a previous locator clip right there. So this little magic guy is basically going to press this button, and if I press this button right now, you'll see my window of what I'm viewing, which is right here, skip back to the previous locator. You see that? So I'm moving the cursor back. Really, this glowing thing right here is the cursor, and it's moving back to the previous locator every time I click on that button. So we can use that to create a repeat. I'm going to select the previous locator clip, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to jump back to where I need my first auto repeat, which is between the first and second song for the welcome. I'm going to click there, and then at the last measure of this welcome pad, I'm going to add the previous locator clip to the stop skip track. So I'll click here, paste, and now this is, it's going to prevent the cursor from continuing into the song, but it's going to jump all the way back to this locator. So let's listen and see what that sounds like. Zoom out a little bit so you can see it happen. So that starts to flash. When this starts to flash, it's pressed that button. I'll show you one more time. So it's going to jump back to that locator. That's not what we want, but it did prevent it from progressing. So what we need to do is add a locator somewhere in here. After the pad has already swelled in, we're going to add a locator to maybe like right here, just so that it's got this kind of section of audio that it can loop that sounds smooth and seamless and not weird. So we're going to click here, we're going to click set, and rename this auto repeat. And let's test that by ear just to see how it sounds. It sounds way better than this, but I think we could probably get it better still. So I'm going to drag it forward to here and see if this sounds smooth. Nope. How about here? That's way better. I could keep messing with it, and I might still, when I'm making the service, but for the sake of the video, we'll just move on to the next one. So there's an auto repeat right there, and essentially what's going to happen is this is going to play until the end of time, until the drummer presses the 2 key. So for instance, like this, it's going to just continue to loop this section of audio, and then the drummer hits the 2 key to move on into the next song.
Intro 4, 5, 6.
Great, so we've added an auto repeat for the welcome. I also need an auto repeat for the message interactive, which happens at the end of the song, right? And I need an auto repeat for the response noodling as I go into the response song. So I'm going to create the auto repeat again by going and finding my secret little hidden tool previous locator clip. I'm going to go to the interactive section of pad that I added, and I'm going to drop the previous locator clip into the stop skip track, and I'm going to add a locator for my auto repeat function, rename this auto repeat, and I'm going to test it to make sure it sounds pretty good. That's pretty good. I might tinker with it a little bit, but just for the sake of the video, we'll move on. I'm going to do the same thing for the response noodling section, and I already have still copied. The last thing that I copied was the previous locator, so I can just click here in the stop skip track and Command V to paste, and add a locator, maybe like right here with set, rename it auto repeat. And let's play a little section just to see how it sounds. That's pretty good, yeah. And then the drummer would hit 3 to get out of that.
3, 4.
Great. So that is everything except for the celebrations audio, which we're going to add now, borrowing a lot of the same concepts we've already covered. So I'll fold down this pads group. We don't want a pad. I have separate kind of special audio created that I'm going to use for the celebrations audio. So I'm going to go into full screen so we can see a little bit more clearly. Open my search pane, local Ableton files, celebrations audio folder. I'm going to unfold that. And then I've got these 2 different celebrations audio songs, Chasing You and Grateful. And what I've done is just taken multi-tracks from both of these worship songs and chopped them up and made them, just taken kind of the beats from them and created a repeating loop for to go behind the celebrations elements of the service. So I'm gonna pick which one I want and drop it in at the end of the song, the last song. So we've got Worthy in the key of G, but not really. We have it in the key of F. And my decision here between these two songs is based on what key the last song is in. I have Celebrations audio in E or in A, which is pretty far apart in the spectrum of frequency. So the plan here is to pick the song that's closest to the key of the last song. In this case, F is one semitone away from E, which means that if I need to transpose the Celebrations audio to match the last song, I don't have to transpose it as far as I would if I chose A. So I'm going to choose E, and I'm going to unfold this. I'm going to drop in Celebrations Chasing You E 99 BPM into this Drop Files and Devices Here section. Cool, so that loaded in the tracks, and then the clips are all the way back here in the far left. Just like the process of moving the multi-tracks in the previous video, I click the top clip, and I move out past the far right of the bottom clip, and I shift click, Command X to cut, and then I have to jump over here to this where the celebrations should happen. And I have to, again, kind of guess where I want it to swell in. I'm going to put it right here just to start with. I might move it forward in the service to the left on the timeline so that as this song fades out, the Celebrations audio fades in. But what I'm going to do first is move all of the red clip content up into this master set of red tracks. In this case, it's dark gray, just to signify that this is Celebrations audio, not an actual song. But the process is the exact same. So I'm going to shift click there, Command X, arrow up, Command V. I'm going to delete the packaging of these red tracks. And while I'm here, I'm going to actually fold this down for a second and move my visual cue to the very bottom. Oops, I just dropped it into that group. That's not great. So I'm going to Command Z to undo that. Fold this back up. I'm going to drag it to the bottom, because remember what I said earlier, that the people who are looking for the visual cue are trained to look for the track that's at the very bottom of the list here. So that's good. And I remember I need to transpose this to be in the key of F, which is what the last song was in. This is in E, so I need to only transpose it up one semitone. So I'm going to click the first tonal clip and shift click the bottom tonal clip and unfold my view pane here. Cool. I'm going to go up one semitone. So this is now going to play back in F. And I've got a few things in here that will help to kind of dress this up and have it play back well. But first I'm going to listen and make sure that it's actually going to swell and fade in at the right time. Okay, I probably want it to start to fade in right there. So what I'm going to do is click, I'm going to unfold my group. I'm going to click here and shift click to select all of this content for the Celebrations audio. I'm just going to drag it forward one measure. Even though it overlaps here, the audio kind of is already faded out in the multi-track, so we'll listen to that. Just make sure that sounds good. Yeah, that's great. So then this right here gives me some instructions. Add locators at beginning and end of this clip. This marker track has some instructions in this clip. Add locators at the beginning and end of this clip. And that is for the auto repeat. So the locator at the beginning is going to be for the auto repeat, which is built in to the Celebrations audio. When I dropped it in, this came over with it, this repeat locator clip. So I don't have to add that myself. That came with the Celebrations audio. So I'm going to click here, set. Rename this auto repeat and test it. So I'll play right here, and it should, when it gets there, it should start to flash and then jump back. Cool, so that is what should happen at Celebrations, but now I need to transition out of service, at the end of the service. And so the locator I'm going to add at the end of the service is actually locator number 5, which is already in our template. So I'm going to zoom all the way out, pressing the minus button, and I can see locator number 5. So I can drag this all the way over past locator 4, which is kind of weird. And then let me zoom back in so I can see what I'm doing. Cool, so the beginning and end of this clip. So at the end of this clip, I want locator 5. And I'll just test that to make sure that if I hit the 5 key now, great. So that's that. Now I just want to rename this to say the end of service. So number 5 is end of service. Excellent. Then the final thing that I want to do is add a stop clip to the service. So that is our final transition, and really in Ableton is stopping Ableton. So I'm going to go to the very far right again. This is where I kind of have my hidden toolbox, is the very far right here. And I've got like where this previous locator clip was. I can fold this back down, hide that. But this stop clip will stop the cursor. Once the cursor hits this stop clip, it stops Ableton. It presses the stop button up here. So I'm going to go to the end of the celebrations audio where it says end of service, and then out past the end of it, anywhere really I can put the stop clip. Right there is good. So let's hit 5 and play. Great. So that is the process of creating transitions in Ableton for our Sunday morning worship service. We've got all of the multi-track content in for the songs, and I've got locators for all the other elements of the service and pads for every other element. Again, when we add pads, we also have to remember to add the tempo clip so that we can control the tempo that Ableton is playing back this audio at. And we've got auto repeats for all the sections that need it, and we've got celebrations audio, which also auto repeats. And we've got a locator to get out of the service and a stop clip to stop Ableton. So thanks for tuning into this video. Check in with the next video for how to add to create a ProPresenter playlist. So we're going to be working in ProPresenter next, and then after that we're going to do another Ableton video of how to add ProPresenter commands into Ableton. Thanks guys, we'll see you.